Cineboys to Cinemen, episode 36.
36.
36. Hope you're well wherever you are, whatever you're doing. This week, The Killer.
Yes.
Fincher's The Killer. I was thinking it's really strange, actually, that it's the first film we reviewed that we haven't watched at the cinema. As in, like, a new release.
Yeah, that's true, actually. I didn't even bother checking if it was around. It's just been on Netflix.
No, I think it had, like, a really limited... Because Netflix tends to do that, don't they? They have, like, a really limited sort of, like, release in cinemas before.
Yeah. Basically, so it can qualify for the Oscars, I think. And that's it. Yeah.
But, we're going to talk about that. We'll dabble a little bit with Fincher. I think we mentioned in the outro of the last episode we're sort of reticent to talk a great deal about him because he's one of the director's names in the director deep dive pot.
Yes.
Which I'm sure we'll revisit. We've got Jonathan Demme next.
We do, yeah. We'll do that soon. Yeah.
So we'll do him later. Well, review him. We'll talk about him. Oh, fucking hell. As the film focuses on the Hitman, we'll talk about the Hitman in cinema, or Hitman films. And we've picked a couple each to sort of ramble on about.
Yep.
So, that's it, really.
Let's do it.
Yeah, shall we?
All right, then.
Questing the cinematic void.
I realised that it's I said review Jonathan Demme as a person. I don't know what that really means.
Well, we can.
We can review as a human being with our limited
We'll have to be sort of
him.
journalists.
Yeah.
And we'll go out there and do some research and like speak to his family and review him as a man.
Maybe get him as an interview.
Yeah, that could be quite
Cineboys first.
Yeah.
No, of course we'll talk about his movies, which we'll do soon, I guess. I guess we'll wait for like a blank spot in the cinematic calendar.
Maybe after Napoleon, although obviously we're coming up to Oscar season, so
it's going to get heavy, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Thick with films.
Yeah.
Largely run-of-the-mill films.
It's annoying that, probably, yeah. It's annoying Jonathan Demme doesn't have anything on the slate, because we could have combined it, but thanks a bunch, Johnny. Maybe cut that out, Ben. I don't know. See how you feel.
Oh God,
Jesus! I'm sorry. It's the first time I've had a beer before starting the podcast.
I was just thinking that we've had some beers. We're feeling a bit cheeky.
Yeah.
Cineboys uncut.
Yeah.
Like 3 beers. This is what life's like in your 30s. Like 3 beers, and you feel like you're off the leash. So the Hitman film.
Yeah.
You know, it's. I think we sort of alluded to it in a previous episode, but it's really quite a staple of the genre. I mean, it's strange that it doesn't have like its own sort of set genre. It's sort of under the umbrella of action films, thriller films, or sort of spy thrillers, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's a genre that's sort of existed for right since the inception. You know?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think possibly one of the reasons why that is because you got. It's a sort of real treat narratively, isn't it? You've got like a real simple moral conundrum, you know, like earning a living versus your morals, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's usually like a personal story and like a personal journey. Not all the time.
No.
I mean, some of the best Hitman films are duos, actually, but, you know, there's still usually like quite a personal through line that goes through them about someone becoming either better or worse, and I mean it lends itself to the sort of hour and a half, 2 hour story really quite nicely.
That's true. Yeah. There's a sort of condensed, something naturally sort of quite condensed about them narratively.
Yeah,
I've not considered that, but that's a good point. I think one of the sort of key themes about narrative films is the sort of sense of nihilism. There's always sort of like a real sort of darkness to them.
Yeah,
that I think the best examples of this sort of subgenre, you know, do really well in sort of interrogating that and interrogating the inherent sort of contradictions of the sort of like morality of the hitman, and it's always quite strange to see films that try and inject some semblance of morality.
Oh, completely. Yeah,
you know, the best ones tend to sort of focus on that contradiction, and I think that's, you know, a few of the examples that I've picked out, and I think you as well, are films that are very much about that, and of course The Killer is too. I would argue perhaps not as effective as it thinks it is.
Yeah, okay, I can see
in that department.
Yeah.
We'll get into that. I don't know. Like, I think it's a really interesting area of film to talk about, and a Cineboys first.
Yeah,
which is nice because usually we just talk about the same films, the same things like nostalgia and you know, all the time. So it's nice to talk about something new. Although upon doing the sort of research and picking of the 2 films that I've picked, I realise that I've already talked about one of them quite a lot. So
I mean, there's a reason why, though. I know what film you're talking about. It is a fucking good movie, and there's a lot of layers to that film, I think.
Yeah, I think
it's aged in a really interesting way, as well, and the way people think about it as well. So.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree with you.
Won't reveal what it is yet, though.
No. Should we go for a film? Do you want to go first? I feel like I know what your first choice is going to be.
Yeah,
partly because you said it in the last episode, but I would know anyway.
Yes, it's one of my absolute favourites. So much so that at my stag weekend on the third evening, there wasn't as many of us. The film was sort of screened for me. It was a really sweet touch. So like, we know Ben absolutely loves this film. It's In Bruges. A classic of the Hitman. I'd say of the Hitman genre, if you could call it that. I think it's just such a gem. And a real kind of it stands the test of time, at least in some respects. A lot of this sort of dialogue is ridiculously non-PC in certain areas, but it is a very morally complex tale. I think I'll kind of briefly touch on the plot if you haven't seen it. It's basically about two hitmen that arrive in Bruges, the town in Belgium, and they've been sent there to hide out after basically one of them accidentally kills a little boy. And it's a very funny film, but it's very dark, and there's a lot of sort of pathos in there as you kind of get to learn, just exactly, what this guy Ray, played by Colin Farrell, exactly what he's going through. It becomes, from him being a kind of, like you say, a very cynical and bitter guy who hates his surroundings. He's like, Bruiser's a shithole. You kind of slowly start to realise that the reason why he's so kind of downtrodden is because he's very recently experienced, on his first job, he's accidentally shot. He shoots a priest, and the bullet travels through the priest and hits like a 5-year-old boy in the forehead, and he collapses. And so it's just, it's hilarious. There's some like really quotable lines in it, but I love it gets that balance of pathos and humour just right. I got this recommended to me like a year after it came out by my granddad, actually.
Oh right, okay.
And he's like a big film fan, and he sort of said, "Oh, you like this? Like, give this a watch. It's called In Bruges." And I hadn't heard of it at that point, but it was already out on DVD. I think I must have just missed it. And his taste in films at that point in my life, I've since warmed to a lot of the films that he'd recommend, but occasionally they'd be like a bit too arty for me. 2008, I was 14, so I struggled with some of the more heavy-handed films at the time, and I kind of thought, well, this could be a bit of a gamble. I'll buy it. And the opening credits came on, and it had Carter Burwell's score on it, which is like very slow, meditative piano, and shots of like medieval buildings. And I was like, oh, fucking, here we go. This is going to be a slog. Yeah. And by the end of the credits, I was hooked for some reason. I was like, I guess, and sort of there's a through line in the film where it's like this place is simultaneously really irritating, but also really magical and beautiful at the same time. Like there's a bit at the end when like Brendan Gleeson's character, which is sort of the Colin Farrell's fellow hitman who's a lot more experienced than he is, he's like, I didn't mean to be taking the piss out of how Bruges is a fairy tale place. It is a fairy tale place. Like, and I think Martin McDonagh, the director, wrote it based on a excursion he had to Bruges when he was 7, and he had like a kind of almost what do you call it, like a kind of cognitive dissonance, in that his outward behaviour was suggesting that he hated it because he's 7 and he's getting dragged around like a medieval town. Right, okay. But apparently there was something in him that actually really liked it, and I think when you're that age it's quite difficult to express. You can't exactly say that places are pretty, but like inwardly he was sort of taking it all in and absorbing all of this sort of Hieronymus Bosch paintings and stuff like that. I just think it's great. I think it's it's just a Hitman film that gets that balance just right, and it doesn't feel contrived, or it's not. I mean, it is borrowing from a lot that came before it, but it's doing so in like quite a subtle way. You've got the central kind of there's a kind of a theme in it, whereas Bruges is kind of a proxy for Limbo, which is again the reason why a lot of these Hieronymus Bosch paintings are featured in it. And there's sort of a lot of stuff about guilt and judgment, obviously after what's happened with the little boy. And yeah, it's just this sort of mix of that, and I think it's great. I think it's fantastic. I'd recommend it thoroughly.
Yeah,
I'm sure most people have seen it by now.
I would say so, but you never know. I think it is. Yeah, I think there is. It's a sort of crowd pleaser, isn't it? And I don't mean that in a way that's sort of like negative. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but it is sort of like a film that presents the ideas of the sort of Hitman film quite nicely in a way that's sort of using the comedy to sort of leverage that, isn't it? I think he's very good at using comedy to sort of break into those sort of quite dark themes and ideas, which are very obviously very present within the sort of Hitman subgenre.
Completely, like going from that, there's a sort of a line, one of my favourite lines, which is so great because it's simultaneously hilarious and also absolutely like ridiculously upsetting. Like there's a bit where Ray, Colin Farrell's character in the film, sort of hit rock bottom with what's happened to him, and he goes to a park and he intends to shoot himself, and he gets stopped by Brendan Gleeson's character, and there's a line he just says, you're gonna kill yourself, and he just goes, I'm allowed. There's just something so hilarious about that, but also dark and horrible at the same time. It's like, I'm allowed. Like, well, fuck, I guess. It's I just think that line sums up the kind of tone that it sets. Really. I mean, I just think there's a reason why it stayed with me, and why I saw it twice in one day once. Which is kind of weirdly pathetic. It was at university. I don't know. I think I watched it on my own, and then everyone came round and chucked it on again or something. There's definitely a reason why that film stayed with me, and I just think it's one of. For me, I am slightly biased because I watched it at an age when, how like. Perhaps films that aren't actually as perfect as you think they are, but because you saw it at a time in your life, it does. I think it does suffer from that, because I've heard a lot of criticism about it since, particularly like the way it's shot. No, it's ever so slightly lazy. I think it looks quite nice, but there's certain aspects of it which haven't aged tremendously well. There's also scenes which are kind of part of YouTube compilations. The bit where Ralph Fiennes starts smashing the phone into there's that scene which I think it's always the scene everyone remembers. But,
it is definitely one of those movies that I think is sort of it's sort of ingrained in that sort of like quick clip, easily digestible, swift content culture, isn't it? Which isn't necessarily the film's fault, because I mean, obviously that preceded this whole rise of this kind of way in which people digest media or engage with films, particularly. But no, I think it still holds up. I mean, I've not seen it for a while, so I'd be interested to watch it now in the sort of current context. More broadly speaking, McDonagh as a filmmaker is someone that isn't afraid to sort of go into those dark places. If you think about Three Bridges. Three Billboards is very much, it's a film that's a little bit closer to the sort of contemporary discussions that are happening around culture, and and that film obviously drummed up quite a debate about the ethics of redemption, and a redemptive arc for someone that is obviously quite a
bit of an extremist,
a quite hateful character, doing a sort of 180 and realising the error of his ways, and sort of given that sort of almost sort of cathartic ending, which a lot of people took issue with, which I think is a fair criticism. But more broadly on the idea of McDonagh, he's obviously a filmmaker that will do those things, and he will approach these kinds of stories and characters in that way, regardless of what the era is. Oh yeah, he will. I mean, he does, even in Bruges, like he kills the wrong fella, right? Because Ray, I mean, there's a ambiguous ending to sort of Ray's fate, but Brendan Gleeson's who plays a kind of, not necessarily against type, he plays quite a sort of warm-hearted guy who's sort of acting as almost father figure to Ray. And he's the one who gets smashed on a pavement at the end. Like, he does do that with his characters, and he gives the wrong people the redemptive arc sometimes. And not so much in Seven Psychopaths. I wasn't as keen on that, actually. I need to watch it again. But God, I haven't seen that for a long time.
it sort of faded into obscurity for me quite quickly. But yeah, he's very good at that. And, arguably, Three Billboards, the main character's pretty nasty in it as well. She's Frances McDormand's character. I know sort of the reason why she's so hateful is because she's had this tragedy happen to her. Yeah. But she's reacting in a very sort of knee-jerk way to it. I mean, Christ, I can't I can't like begin to think what it must be like. However, she's very complex, moral person as well. He just likes playing with those things. And
yeah, I mean, and I think your mileage will vary depending. I mean, and it's a ridiculous thing to say because your mileage will vary with any movie. But I think in the context of him and kind of filmmaker is, I think he's someone that you're either on board with or you aren't. You know what I mean? And I think, I think particularly in the case of In Bruges, I think, it will go through this sort of cultural revisionism in which people sort of watch these films through the lens of the way we look at culture now and all that sort of stuff. And I'm fascinated by that process. It's not something I disregard, but I don't think necessarily it should stop people from enjoying films from that time.
You can tell he's a playwright. I think, especially in the case of In Bruges, because it's like a premise you can write on a napkin. You know what I mean? It's like a very. It's like it. I actually can't think of any other examples at the moment, which is really annoying. But there must be hundreds of films before In Bruges that start with two hitmen, right? Simple moral conundrum sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember the scene when he's in the art gallery and he's looking at the paintings about judgment. There's such a nice moment. And again, the Carter Burwell score is a really nice soundtrack as well as a really kind of simple piano melodies where he's just looking at a painting. And for me, like, I sometimes can struggle with art galleries, or at least as I was growing up, like, they're difficult places to stomach if you're like a teenager, right? You have to walk around. But also, like, as I've got older, I've realised why people enjoy it. Like, you can just sit and stare and look at the art, and it's nice. There's a bit in that where you think Ray's going to hate the art gallery, right? Of all places, because of the nature of his character. But he's like, all the others are rubbish. This one's quite good. And it slows in a really unexpected time to a really nice sort of steady downbeat pace for a bit, and it's filled with those moments, slightly unexpected moments of just pathos. And it's great.
It's a hard thing to do, pathos, I think, for characters of this ilk.
Yes, completely.
And I think this is something that there's a lot of ways in which people try and get you to get on board with these characters, either by sort of getting in with their sort of routines or highlighting the sort of contradictory nature of the way of life. And I think it's interesting that they would use guilt. Which is something that is, again, a sort of quite big part of the sort of hitman subgenre, but it's used to quite good effect through comedy. In Bruges. Again, I've not seen it for a very long time, so I would like to see it again on the back of this discussion, just to see how those elements all come together.
I think I definitely watch it again with that in mind, and just the idea of guilt. And obviously McDonough, British-Irish, I guess, but he must have a lot of reverence for Ireland, and obviously Catholicism is quite a big part of Ireland, Irish culture, so it's quite fitting that those themes kind of bleed into a story, despite the fact it's set in Belgium. Like it's actually got more connection to Ireland than Belgium, I think, in Bruges.
Guilt and judgment, man, they're classic Catholic themes, right? We talked about that with Scorsese last week.
Did.
Films are dogged with that sort of similar ideas, if not sort of different, obviously, in their execution. But no, it's good. It's nice. I like, because there's a tendency, and I think I might do it with my sort of chat, to sort of talk about sort of sort of arty, foreign films, but it's nice to hear, you bring a film that's really personal to you, and I think I think that's really nice, and it fits obviously really well with the
man.
The potatoes we've got in the shed.
A shed with an oven in it.
Of course.
Which we using to bake the potatoes.
Yeah, exactly. For all of you.
Yes, all our dear listeners.
Yes, it's funny actually. I was thinking when we were talking about Hitman films, I was like, I'll put something out, and I realised, does it just sound like I'm just asking people to talk about their favourite Hitman film, as in the Hitman
the
film
franchise
from the games? And there's only two.
I
don't know. I just suddenly panicked, and I was like, oh god, like. I mean, to be honest, it's my fault. I put the poll out too late, or the questions out too late, so no one's replied. But cheers. But you know, like I thought, God, like that's pretty. Like, there's not a lot to talk about there. And how many people seen them? You know, I don't know. It's strange.
I mean, yeah, I've watched them, but I've watched one of them, the Timothy Olyphant one, not the Rupert Friend one. I can't believe I even know that. I don't know why I know so much about those movies.
Yeah, the second one is so shit. I mean, the first one isn't that great, but it's sort of half watchable.
Yeah.
The second one is fucking shite. And I remember thinking that I mean, this is a bit of an aside, although it isn't, because it's Hitman, literally.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking that film could have just been done with like such a smaller budget to encourage invention.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, whereas I think they had loads of money behind it, and I think there's just this tendency with these sort of big franchise tie-in films to make them as big and bombastic as possible.
Yeah.
It just gives the film, it just ruins it. It just takes it away from what I guess the games are about. I mean, I don't have particular reverence for the games, but obviously I played them sporadically throughout my youth and a little bit in my adult life, but yeah, it's strange that those films exist in that way to me.
I do. It's interesting that immediately, because it's an established sort of franchise, that there's more money will get thrown at it, and yet that would be ultimately to the film's detriment, because I mean, I've played them a bit actually, and you could make a really small, like low budget kind of tight thriller from that kind of game, like an hour and a half sort of. Maybe one big fight at the end sort of thing, but like interesting choreography.
Yeah.
Just a crew of 11 people or something. But yeah, they did go too big on that.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll rewatch them. Maybe not.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't think there's any particular reason to watch either of those two films ever again.
Wasn't the second one? I remember is it Rupert Friend that plays?
I think so. And I remember there being like a scene where he's like, there's like a helicopter.
Yeah. Yes.
And at that point, I remember thinking, this is just like such a paint by numbers sort of affair.
That
I was expecting anything different. I don't know.
He's got such a kind face. The guy in the second one who plays Hitman, he's meant to be sort of chiseled, sort of soulless killer, and he's got like he looks like a pretty boy. You know what I mean? I always found the casting choice in the second one really odd.
Like a pretty boy who lost some like a frat boy bet or something and shaved his head.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, that was a bizarre aside.
No, yeah.
My film choice is fucking so far removed from that, and I was sort of lamenting the fact that people choose the foreign films, and that's what I've done. I've chosen Le Samurai.
Go for it.
It was interesting because I was going through doing a bit of the cursory research as we do here at Cinder Boys Cinemen, and Fincher uses it as a touchstone, and I think it makes sort of sense on the basis of how the killer frames their sort of life and the sort of contradictions and the sort of archetypal, I guess, coldness of the sort of hitman way of life. But it's Jean-Pierre Melville, who of course is a sort of titan of French cinema, one of the greats. Someone I, very early in my sort of like film journey, he was like the first like big sort of world cinema director I really got into. He's really responsible for gangster films. He did one of my all-time favourites, Army of Shadows, about the French resistance during the Second World War.
Oh, nice. Okay,
excellent film. One of the most sort of heartbreaking and punishing sort of like war films. He's just a fantastic director and someone that's well worth checking out. But he made Le Samurai, it's kind of like this ode to the sort of samurai revisionism which was conducted by Kurosawa, but obviously taken away from Japan and situated in Paris.
Yeah, okay.
What ties the element of the samurai into this sort of cucumber cool sort of French hitman film is that the hitman lives the life of the Bushido, which is like the samurai code of ethics. But basically, the loose idea of the plot is that I don't want to give too much away because I think it's something that you should definitely check out. But it's a hitman that does a job, and then he gets hunted by the same people that gave him the job, whilst being hunted by the police.
Yeah,
and he's trying to work out who's double crossed him whilst evading capture from the police.
Yeah, so very tense by the sounds of things.
Yeah, but there's something. I mean, it's the hitman is played by Alain Delon, who's obviously one of the most ridiculously handsome men of all time.
Yeah,
he lives like a life of isolation in a Parisian suburb, and he almost sort of dips back into the city for a kill. Like he's some sort of predatory cat almost.
Right. Yeah.
And he lives this life of isolation in like this sparse, dirty flat with nothing in it. He has no connections with anyone. And the film really sort of focuses on those sort of inherent contradictions of the life, and it's almost accentuated by cucumber cool nature of the performance from Delon, and the sort of connotations of, you know, French gangster cinema, which has always got this inherent suaveness to it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know, on the basis of, you know, of the films that have come before it, very much from Melville. But what Melville's very good at, he's very good at sort of the washed out grittiness of it. Like there's like this film feels like there's like a sort of like, it feels like it's almost always grey and rainy, but it's beautifully shot. It's desaturated and washed out, but it looks stunning. And his films are always stunning visually. In the context of this film, it works in sort of offsetting the sort of coolness of him. Yeah. You know, he's not living. You know, he's not sort of in these sort of neon drenched sort of urban settings, or is he in these sort of like places of high society? You know, he's walking amongst the sort of like rain battered, sort of dilapidated buildings of some Parisian suburb, or he's out in the streets, and the cinematography is sort of, it doesn't sort of strip the city of the beauty, because it's quite difficult with Paris, but it's sort of like there's sort of a cold distance to it.
Yeah. Oh man, I Paris is like that though. Like Paris is, the amount of crime in Paris is incredibly surprising. So, you know, it'd be fitting for a lot of these sort of films to come from that country and to be set in that city. And I love the idea of a almost sort of working class hitman. So I think quite often it can be glamorized, as we'll probably talk about later on with Fincher's effort. And that, I mean, sounds like it's the exact opposite, you know.
Yeah, I think the sort of the process of stripping the glamour away from Delon, and indeed the profession more broadly, is achieved cinematically, you know, but it's also achieved narratively through the sort of the way in which that he's being pursued by the people that have employed him. Right. So like, there's this idea that he's obviously going out for revenge and trying to wrestle power back from this omnipresent sort of power structure, this sort of malevolent sort of criminal enterprise that is obviously orchestrating everything from behind the scenes. And you know, like, it's, you know, he's so disempowered by this experience, and yet he's constantly hunting for it, searching for power, searching for agency.
Okay.
And that's one of the first contradictions, is that, you know, they're always in control and they're cool and they're suave, but even someone like Delon, who plays it so inch perfectly, like, you can see that sort of facade of power slipping.
Okay.
And I think that's part of that. Another contradiction is in his character. Like, he lives alone. His relationships with women, particularly, are, you know, very physical.
Okay,
he has very few words to say to them. He can't connect to people, and it's just the idea that you know, he's obviously just a bit psychotic. You know, you can't have this way of life and not sort of be somewhat psychotic, and it almost sort of strips away that element of coolness, because, you know, how can it be cool if you're just a bit sort of deranged? And if you enjoy, you know, if you do this work and continue to do it, then, you know, there's something to be said for that. I think
so. Yeah. Is it? Does it have voiceover by him or anything like that?
Not really. So the film communicates a lot through silence.
Oh,
so,
right.
Like,
okay.
You know, like, so Melville's sort of washed out sort of stylings. I mean, I want to sort of emphasize that doesn't mean the film doesn't look stunning. It's a beautifully shot movie. But, you know, like, a lot of it's communicated through sort of stolen glances. There's so much sort of depth, philosophical depth, as to the nature of what it is to be a hitman, the moral sort of complexity of being a hitman. But it's communicated through sort of silence, because Delon is almost this sort of monosyllabic loner. You know, like, he's not equipped to deal with social interactions. And the fact it's almost sort of semi-masqueraded in this sort of air of coolness is almost part of that contradiction. It reinforces it. You know, you can't come away from that thinking, God, he's cool, he doesn't say a lot and he shoots people. You know, oh, this guy's clearly just disconnected from humanity so much. His only connection is a bird that he keeps in a cage, which is, again, another sort of heavy sort of philosophical or sort of very metaphorical thing going on there. And there's a lot of interpretation as to whether that shows his distance from humanity or his connection to it, one of the last vestiges of his connection to it.
So he's still kind of has to have a sort of responsibility.
Okay. And there's also sort of, again, going back to, you know, that sort of revisionism of the samurai that was achieved by Kurosawa and, of course, many other filmmakers. You know, it's like, it's that sort of revisionism, the same sort of revisionism we'd have in Western culture for like knights.
Right, okay.
The idea that knights were these like loyal people who protected the realm and were like, steadfast in their morality, which of course we know isn't true.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting to see that played out, taken away obviously from the, the sort of the Bushido code and the samurai and honor and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It's about the preservation of the lord or the land, whereas for him it's the preservation of the self.
Okay.
So it's a very sort of like selfish and profession.
Yeah. Oh man.
It's a really, I've rambled for quite a while, but it's a really fantastic movie. It was a bit of a blind spot in his filmography. I mean, obviously there's going to be plenty with someone like him, just sort of fairly limited in terms of accessing his films. But
I couldn't find it. I was going to watch it for today, and I couldn't find it. I think you told me you had it on Blu-ray.
Yeah, I've got it's a Criterion release. But it was only a fairly recent one. Again, it's one of those ones that was quite hard to find until they did like but there's like a BFI box set with some of his other films like The Cercle Rouge and stuff, which are fantastic crime thriller. He's just the fucking granddaddy of like crime thrillers, really. People like Michael Mann and stuff would owe a great deal of debt to him, particularly in the sense of scape and the way he frames these sort of expansive crime dramas that involve lots of different characters, but it's grounded in that sort of gritty yet beautifully washed out aesthetic.
Oh, nice. Would you say Mann's Collateral was taken?
I would definitely think so.
Yeah. It sounds that way. I mean, obviously, Collateral has the Jamie Foxx character to kind of anchor the audience. In some kind of in some sort of humanity, but Cruise's character, on the other hand, is a lot more kind of, by the sounds of things, a lot more like Alain Delon.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I think what I think Melville's great strength is that he can sort of humanize criminality, but never to the point where like it sort of disregards the moral complexity of the situations they're in and the potential horror that might arise from some of their actions.
Yeah, right.
And he brings like a sort of closeness to that sort of world, which is makes him one of the greats for it.
Nice.
Really recommend it. I'd recommend anything by Melville. He's for me, one of my sort of probably top 10 filmmakers. So I would definitely seek him out.
Sounds good. I love a good kind of cold, gritty thriller.
Yeah, and it still oozes style, though. I mean, it's like, and then that might be one of those things where it's like, obviously, I'm just English looking in at French culture, and there's always going to be that thing of going, look how suav that guy is,
purely they carry themselves with such grace.
Yeah. And like, imagine if you lived in France, you wouldn't even fucking think twice. But like, I just think, there is a suaveness to it, and I think the film does a brilliant job of playing to that suaveness, distilling it and uses it in conjunction with that genre so well. Because there are a lot of French filmmakers that were doing that before. I think, is it Shoot the Piano Player? I don't know if it's a Hitman film. I think it's a long time since I've seen it. But again, it's dealing with these similar ideas, and it's very suave and very cool, almost knowingly so.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I fucking love Truffaut, and I love that movie. Well, not enough to remember parts of it, obviously, but it was a long time ago. Give me some credit.
Yeah.
But like, there is that sort of almost self-knowing suaveness, which I think filmmakers like Truffaut and all the greats, in that period play with very well.
No, cool, man.
Good stuff.
I think it might be a good time, whilst we're on the subject of French films, to have an honorary mention of Leon the Professional.
Of course,
which sounds like it borrowed a little bit, if not quite a lot, from this other from Le Samurai as well. Would you say, or
obviously there are going to be links, because I think Melville is someone that I think anyone in this sort of genre would be indebted to just naturally. Again, Leon, I mean, that is a film I've not seen for a very long time. But again, it's one of those films in a sort of similar vein, not to sort of, but to In Bruges, and that's sort of like, it has that, it's one of those films that a lot of people have connected to. And will know about, and will be able to sort of talk about it in detail, apart from me, because I've forgotten it.
I think it's got it's the young star in it, right, of Natalie Portman, and obviously she's gone on to become like a fantastic
stratospheric,
a star in the literal sense of the word, and to have a film earlier on in her career. I know she'd done some roles before Leon. I think she had anyway.
I don't know.
It's very much her equivalent of like Jodie Foster in Taxi Driver sort of role, and so a lot of people would probably revisit it for that reason, to kind of watch her earlier stuff, and so it's entered the public consciousness in that way, maybe. Mm-hmm. Again, I remember that film for that urban legend about someone robbing a jewelry shop near the set of Leon, and going outside, seeing all the police officers who were actually extras, and they turned himself into one of the extras.
Is that true?
I don't know if it's true. I hope it is.
Yeah.
It sounds too good to be true, but there's an urban legend about it, which always connects to Leon for some reason.
Remind me who directed Leon.
Luc Besson.
That's it. Fucking hell, yeah.
Fifth Element, man.
Oh, what was the film he did before?
Shit, yeah.
Yeah, he also directed Nikita, right?
That's
a good movie.
It's a great one.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck, I mean...
He's someone that stock has dropped considerably.
Yes.
And everyone forgets that he did make some fucking good movies.
Oh, man, completely. It's almost like... Same with, Matthew Kassovitz when he did La Haine. He did nothing else after. I know Luc Besson did like Fifth Element, and he did. I think his French filmography is quite extensive, but in the eyes of sort of American and English films, he did that sort of Valerian, the City of Thousand Planets.
The Carla Delevingne in it.
Yeah.
Never saw it.
DeHaan,
Yeah, never saw it.
Strange, yes, an odd filmography, and that has kind of waned a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe it's amazing.
Maybe it'll have its own cultural revisionism.
Yeah, 20 years from now. So have you seen Valerian, the City of 1,000 Planets?
I'm really looking forward to that. Because there's so many. I wonder because if I think about like films like. It's not fair to sort of tie Valerian, whatever it is, and the City of 1,000 Cocks, whatever it's called, but like 2001 was very much maligned.
Yes, yeah.
There are so many films that I wonder if there'll be some films that that we've seen, not necessarily Besson's foreign sci-fi, but that we've disregarded. That in 20 years there'll be sort of this cultural revisionist moment, and the films will get this revival.
I know,
and we'll all be forced to be like, oh yeah,
they're really good. I often think that about because the prequels, when the Star Wars prequels came out, everyone was like, they're fucking shit.
Yeah,
and then like the Disney ones came out, and everyone was like, oh, I actually quite like the prequels.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I always have quite a soft spot for them.
Same, man. I think
it's interesting that you say that because I think there is something going on there with those.
Yeah, and like you say, it'd be fascinating to see what films that people are shitting all over now, whether they'll kind of become
dust off
relevant.
The shit and, burst into a new dawn.
Yeah. My next mention is based on the fact I was hunting for Le Samurai, I couldn't find it, so I typed in Hitman into Netflix.
Always a sage move.
Yeah.
Just type in like a sort of genre into Netflix, and you'll be treated.
I was bombarded with all sorts of really naff looking films, and the one I landed on was the Russo brothers.
Tactical Blast.
Tactical Blast. Yeah.
Call back.
Is their film they did after Avengers Endgame called The Grey Man, which apparently is a Hitman film.
That's Chris Evans.
Chris Evans with a moustache, and Ryan Gosling being very bang average.
Yeah,
he's sort of on autopilot. He's not bad. Neither of them are bad, and it's not necessarily a bad film. But it has that moral setup in the opening scene. There's like a moral quandary that Gosling has to sort of face, and it's semi interesting. It's like you say with that whole neon drenched thing. It plays to that really, and it has that Netflix sheen, which I'm beginning to find quite annoying.
I'm completely with you on that. I not to sort of jump in and take you out of your flow, but
no.
I feel like Netflix, the way they started out as like a real trailblazer, didn't they?
Yeah.
They were the sort of one of the first sort of pioneering studios. Obviously, HBO really started the TV revolution, etc., etc. But like Netflix were the one that really sort of. That home entertainment, streaming, it was the big one, right?
Yeah.
And everyone was like, wow, this sort of, they don't have to play by rules. They can shoot stuff how they want. And now every fucking Netflix project looks exactly the fucking same as the next one.
Yeah.
And I think it's, you just know it. There's sort of like a yellowiness to everything.
Yep. Yeah. It's like a style guide that was weirdly set by Fincher, with House of Cards. That was their first original property, and
so everything's like a product of him in a way.
Yeah, they color graded it. Everything looks like House of Cards, and even when it's more colorful, there's that weird bloom that it has, and there's no grain in it, which annoys me. It's quite like film grain. I think it sort of lends. Even when it's shot digitally, you can put grain back on a film really easily. It's actually quite difficult, but there are companies that do it. A film like Mandy, for example, that got grain put back over it to give it that earthy quality. Netflix ignored that completely, which I think is a mistake. This film just inhabits that space. It's so unabashedly, and like you could tell that.
It's so annoying as well, because for Fincher, as we'll talk about, I assume with The Killers, one of its great strengths is that style works for Fincher.
Oh yeah,
works for the way that he interrogates the themes that exist in the vast majority of his films as a sort of thematic. The films sort of almost link arms, don't they? In a way, and it's strange to see like a watered down, shitty version of it applied to absolutely everything Netflix made.
It is. It
really does whatever sort of narratives or ideas those films or TV shows are going for a disservice, I think.
I mean, the mistake they made was setting their style guide based on a filmmaker whose films are quite often chiefly concerned with coldness and distance.
Yeah,
don't make everything look like that.
Yeah.
You know? It's just odd. But yeah, anyway, there's quite a good action sequence in it in which Ryan Gosling fights a man whilst an open smoke grenade is in his hand, and all the smoke is trailing everywhere, and he's in a plane that's going down. That's quite fun. It is a Hitman film, by the way. It tails off of that at the end. It just becomes a generic sort of action fare, but at the beginning there's like a moral quandary that's set up, but it never goes anywhere. It's kind of almost like the script is saying like, oh, this guy's has got a conscience, but then it doesn't play into the rest of the plot at all. And a lot of
that's often the case with the shitter examples of those kinds of films, isn't it? It set up the moral quandary. I think we sort of critiqued Expendables on that basis, or action films, or straight to DVD action films. If they're trying to frame that, just don't. Do you know what I mean? Like if you know the sort of genre you're working in won't allow you to facilitate that in a way that is meaningful, don't bother.
You just don't need to introduce something just because it's a staple of films that came before it. Like, just accept it for what it is. Maybe people might enjoy it a little bit more, take it at face value. But yeah, I mean, it's too long. Ana de Armas, I think she's a great actor, but I don't actually think she can carry much weight in terms of action scenes and stuff. I think she actually, like that film Blonde, not a lot of people didn't like it. I quite liked it. I thought she was good in it. I think she should sort of stick to that role, really. She's a lot more interesting, but she plays kind of
Knives Out, right?
Yes. Yeah. Again,
sorry, it took me a second for the name to click.
That's right. Yeah, she's in that as well. She's great in that. That's a good film.
Yeah, she's a great actress. But yeah, I have noticed she sort of appeared in films that are very similar to The Grey Man. She seems to be in a few of those now.
Yeah, she's just sort of a gun-toting
James Bond too, wasn't she?
Yeah. God, she was. Yeah. Oh yeah, she was. That was No Time to Die.
Still haven't seen that, actually.
It's all right. it's literally all right. It's better than Grey Man.
Well,
but there we go.
What is it sort of about it then that makes it? Because it's interesting. Because it's weird. I was thinking, we start off with like a comedy Hitman film. We've gone to like one of the sort of classics of the genre. Now we're going to like a sort of contemporary sort of shit attempt to grapple these themes ideas. What is it? Do you think that is the problem with it in terms of the way it handles the sort of fare?
I think the problem with it is that, like I was saying earlier, is the personal journey, right? That is what I think is the staple of a Hitman film, and it doesn't have any of that. It's globe-trotting, it's not confined to one location. Paris or Bruges, for example. I really think that with less, like you said, like with less money and with more introspectiveness
and less concern with star power as well, I think, in the case of The Grey Man.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's too many.
Seen it, but
well, there's too many familiar faces in it, and it pulls you out rather than takes you in. and I know it's not trying to be In Bruges. Like, it's a very different movie. Like, even if it was good, it would be a really different film.
Yeah, it's not trying to be Le Samurai or anything like that, is it? No.
But at the same time, that's kind of its issue. It really could have. I mean, I think, you know, if you just stuck to maybe just Gosling, and I'm sure we'll talk about Gosling a little bit more. Sure, it's funny. But I think that's its main problem, is its lack of personality, really. And I know that's a cookie cutter criticism, but it is true. You know? Yeah. Shit green screen at the end as well. I don't know why. The majority of it, the green screen is actually alright, and at the end it seemed like they ran out of time. They always do that. Like, the ending battle always seems to just take place on a soundstage where it's dawn for seemingly hours. You know?
The Russos.
Yeah, actually,
they love it, don't they?
They love a magic hour, but not real magic hour.
Yeah,
it's too expensive and time consuming. Yeah. No, give it a miss. Although, you know, if you got Netflix, it's technically free. So watch the scene on the plane with the smoke grenade.
Then turn it off.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting we talk about, like, Gosling being average, and I think obviously this is a guy that's, you know, worked in lots of stuff. He's in The Notebook, which is pretty iconic in right. But I think it was Drive, which is the film I want to talk about briefly. I got really excited about the prospect of talking about Drive, but I realised we've already talked about it. I can't remember what episode it was, actually, but I know we have, but I can't remember when.
Yeah, we have. I'm racking my brains as well. I can't remember which episode
we just recycle the same shit, don't we? But, you know, I think, you know, what's interesting about Gosling's career is that, like, he playing the kind of character he does in Drive has sort of almost, I mean, he's done a great job of breaking out of it and working on some really great stuff and proving how fucking good he is.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think it's, you know, that character that he played in Drive, I think is put him in a lot of sort of, like, you know, writers and directors' minds for sort of bang average films of a similar ilk.
Yeah.
And
right.
I think he'll dip into it as and when, I guess, because it's quite lucrative to do so.
Yeah.
And he knows he can do the great films alongside. So, well, you know. But I think Drive is a particularly interesting film to bring up in this context, as it's, I think, a film that, again, focuses on the sort of psychological makeup of that sort of way of life.
Yes. And the person you need to be in order to
inhabit that space. And the person you're never going to be as a result.
Yeah.
Which I think is really important in the context of Drive. Because, again, it's, you know, obviously, I think I've said this before, but, you know, it's an allegorical Western that it sees Refn interrogate the grisly nature of being an assassin and how such a life requires some kind of psychological or cognitive deficiency. And it's something that's heightened by his attempt to sort of establish some sense of normalcy in his life through a human connection.
Yeah.
What I particularly like in that context is that sort of Refn's framing of the violence is very, in stark contrast to a lot of the film, is sort of swift, brutal, and quite unstylistic.
Yeah.
You know, if you think in the context of Drive, and obviously the scene that brings this to light, it would be the elevator sequence.
Yeah.
You know, it's the scene which is, you know, very stylistic. There's, you know, is it Cliff Martinez with the score? I believe it is.
Yeah.
You know, it's sort of heightened, the lights turn on, and there's this sort of really romantic moment, and then it just ends the moment Gosling stamps on that guy's face and crushes it.
Yeah.
And it's just the idea that, you know, that he can't escape those psychological and cognitive deficiencies that have sculpted him, and the kind of person that he is. Why I think that scene is so great is because she's realised that even though he protected her, he showed a part of himself in that process that was like, okay, it's not just about protection for you. Like, this is part of who you are. There's like violence as in your nature.
Yes, yeah. He's got a scorpion on his back. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. You remember that? Fucking hell, it's coming back to me now because, like, shit. Like, yeah. I just think it's so brilliant in the way that it frames that character journey.
Yeah.
And offers a sort of crumb of hope in that sort of hyper stylized nature, and in the soundtrack, which is obviously one of the most famous things about the film, because, I mean, I was definitely part of this, but, you know, when we were at uni, That was the film everyone talked about.
Real Hero. Right?
Everyone loved that idea of sort of fusing, like a neon-drenched sort of setting with like a pulsing synth soundtrack. That started that, I think, for a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know, like I just think the film does that really, really well. And I think maybe because it inspired this sort of whole, generation of filmmakers in terms of the way they approach films. In terms of the style, I think maybe it's lost a bit of stock as a result. I don't know, but like, I think it's a real solid. I genuinely think it's like a real modern masterpiece. Like I know a lot of people say that about the film. It's not exactly new to say. That's probably arguably quite trite to say it, but
this is part of the. I love the film as well. I don't have a problem with it at all. But I think that too many people said that. And it had a backlash, a natural backlash, which happens with a lot of films which are very good, very successful, and well renowned. People find holes to pick, and quite often those criticisms, I think, are unjustified.
Its popularity ends up doing it a disservice, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Like you say, like a lot of people go, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people go, oh, if everyone's saying it, there's got to be something shit about it.
Yeah. Oh, and then people.
Which I'm guilty of.
Oh man, we all are, but I think people jump on it was mismarketed bandwagon as well. Because people thought it was going to be like Fast and Furious, and it wasn't. Because it had I think the trailer leaned in on the kind of car stuff.
Element. Yeah. I do remember thinking that. Yeah.
But I mean, it is funny because I think with the difference between Drive and In Bruges is that Ray in Bruges really shows his humanity. And shows that he's actually almost too compassionate to carry out, to be part of this profession. Whereas Gosling's the opposite. Is he's sort of inadvertently, ultimately shows his lack of humanity, and that's why he's still.
I think that's central. Like it's interesting. I think the best Hitman films, it's central. That's central to the journey. Is that realization that if you're in it, you're not.
You sold your soul.
Yeah, and it's like I think In Bruges does quite a good job of sort of interrogating that in a comedic way and thus adding pathos, but it fundamentally is still something that is inherently obviously problematic. And if you think about like Pulp Fiction, Samuel L. Jackson and Johnny Travolta, it's like they're iconic. They're like when you think of hitmen in cinema, they're the two you think of.
Oh, completely.
And obviously Tarantino's use of dialogue invites you into that world, and the sensibilities that he uses to invite you into that world makes it more palatable.
Yes, yeah.
But fundamentally, they're still, rotten people. They do have human qualities,
completely,
and they can show that, and it sparkles in them occasionally.
Yeah,
but I find that fascinating. Do you think that's problematic?
I think Pulp Fiction, like you say, does a great job of constructing a universe where it isn't problematic, but if that were to happen in the real world, it would be horrendous, and they'd be caught long before they get to do what they do. But I love one of my favourite bits about Pulp Fiction is the slight departure from the kind of hitman side of it, and him just meeting Uma Thurman, getting on with her, and then taking her to hospital and stuff like that. That's a good example of the human side, and which Tarantino I don't think uses as much anymore, which is a shame because I think it's employed to great effect in Pulp Fiction. I just think it's funny because I talk about this idea of how central the contradictions of humanity versus the way of life, and how that's central, I think, to the best examples of the genre. But it's interesting that we talk about films like In Bruges and Pulp Fiction that used humour or like a certain style and sensibilities in writing and cinematic approach that almost leave those concerns by the wayside. And I think that's interesting, and I think that's something that perhaps could be delved into further, perhaps in a later episode. Yeah, definitely.
In the way how the way it's sort of the same way when we talk about violence. Like I fucking love action movies. But I fucking hate real world violence. I fucking hate it.
Oh yeah,
I mean, most people hate it, but like I'm not one of those people. Even if I see like aggression in like just a normal everyday context, I panic. I hate it. Like so, it's interesting that films can do that, and I think it'd be worth doing an episode about that perhaps in the future.
Definitely, just in the departure from real world scenarios and how a film can
endear itself to
can
us
pull
and
you
others.
in with its own universe. Pulp Fiction in Bruges especially, and just kind of make you forget that these people, if you encounter them in real life and you had a conversation with them and they revealed to you. There's a scene in Bruges where he says, what do you do for a living? I kill people for money. It's played for laughs. If that happened in real life, she'd be gone. She would be gone.
That disconnect is part of the way it works. What part of the reason it works, right? Obviously, I mean, as a source of entertainment, it's interesting. I'm not poo-pooing that. I'm not saying that shouldn't happen. I just think it's interesting.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Should we talk about The Killer?
Yes, let's do that.
Obviously after talking to you about it, I know you're a huge Fincher fan.
Yeah.
And obviously, I think Fincher's great. But it's interesting that this film, I don't know if it's because it's through Netflix. For me, like, I knew literally nothing about it until I saw a trailer at the Watershed.
Okay, yeah.
Which is probably bad on me, really, for calling myself a film fan, not knowing when Fincher's next film is out. But I don't know. It didn't seem there was a great deal of buzz around it at all.
No, it's a lot of bus posters, but
yeah. I've noticed that more now.
Yeah, no one's really talking about it though, and I have to kind of prompt people. But there's another Fincher film out.
Yeah. And that's the thing about streaming. I just think it's hard to generate buzz. Like, I think streaming is they've nailed generating buzz for TV shows, but not for movies.
Yeah, agreed. Even with a Fincher film.
Yeah. You think Fincher would do that? I mean, you think about something like Gone Girl. I mean, fucking everyone talked about fucking Gone Girl for 2 or 3 weeks, regardless of what you thought about the film upon consumption. It was like a big cultural moment. A lot of people were talking about it, But I just feel like this film didn't have that.
No, it didn't, and it
felt sort of lukewarm. I felt lukewarm to it going in.
Okay, right.
Which is strange for me to say that, because I really try and avoid that sort of any sort of feeling towards a film before I go in, because I don't want that to dictate my experience. And overall, I would say I didn't dislike it.
Okay, yeah.
There were things I really liked about it, but there was a lot I just found was inoffensively dull. Okay,
yeah, that's interesting. Now, I think we said this last week. I'm a bit more of a Fincher fanboy than you are, which is it comes with the territory. Like I get swept up in his narratives, and like, I love the way he employs visual effects, which is something I personally love and am interested in.
And that's worthy. That's absolutely absolutely worthy.
I think I liked it a lot more than you did. I definitely thought The Killer had its issues for sure. It was very straightforward. It was like
so straightforward.
Yeah.
So straightforward. But I think maybe there's something in that. And again, we talk about this idea of like films being revised a few years down the line. And I wonder if this film would have the moment. And I did think, I wonder if I rewatch this film in like a couple of years' time, my opinion on it will shift.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at a film like The Game, that's experienced a bit of a revival.
Oh God, yeah.
A lot of people like that now.
Yeah, I quite like that movie.
It wasn't always the case. Like there was a time in which people thought it was his worst film, and he made Alien 3. You know what I mean? So it's funny. I mean, the difference is, I think a lot of people didn't get on with The Game because of its twist. Whereas with The Killer, there's an alarming lack of twist.
It's so straight-laced.
Same with Gone Girl. I mean, Gone Girl had a fantastic twist. And he can do that really well. And I was sort of weirdly waiting for one.
Yeah.
And when it didn't come, I was ever so slightly let down. It still won me over with its stylism.
I think the style of the film is one of its strongest assets. And I think it's particularly effective in the way it sort of frames this. There's almost like a sort of stylishly calamitous nature to Fassbender's character that I really liked.
Yeah.
Like he sort of waxes lyrical about the necessity of planning and conditioning the mind and the body to become this sort of killing machine.
Yeah.
And it's played so straight, as you'd expect from Fincher. And then he just almost largely always balls us up every sort of assassination attempt. Even if he kills someone, there's always something he does slightly wrong, or he makes the whole thing more laborious. And I thought that was one of the strongest elements of the film. There's always this sort of like vaguely comedic undertone.
Yeah.
Underneath sort of like Fincher's textbook seriousness.
Yeah.
Which I really, really liked. And I think the film could have lent into that a lot more.
Yeah, I agree. I think, one of the most entertaining moments is right at the beginning. It's really lots of 10 minutes of him waxing, like you said, just like explaining his process and like washing his hands and then washing the sink that he's washed his hands in. And then he goes to shoot someone and fucks it up. And it is hilarious.
It's great.
So funny.
Great moment. Yeah.
And there's another bit where there's some really good standout moments in it. There's a really quite comedic fight in it. Takes place in a Floridian swamp. And the guy is just massive. He's a unit, and Fassbender has to sort of employ his sleekness to finish him off. But it's really well choreographed and it's really exciting. One of the best scenes, I think. But it is sort of funny in the way this guy just lumbering around. His dog. And
sort of hark back to sort of like silent era cinema silliness in a way.
Yeah, definitely.
It's strange.
Yeah. There's a glass table bit in it.
Very classic. Again, that straight-laced thing.
Yeah.
One thing, going back to the opening, one of the things I really didn't like was that sort of deployment of the sort of nihilistic philosophy of a misanthropic hitman.
No, right.
I think it's like there are 7.8 billion people on the planet. Yeah. So all that sort of thing, like, humanity is a disease, we're all doomed, and it's like, yeah, fair enough. Like, I'm not saying that can't be used as an effective character device, but I remember I watched it with my friend Eleanor, and she sort of leant over to me with that opening monologue and was like, "This is giving me Joker vibes." Do you know?
Right.
And it's strange because I thought, oh, she's not wrong. Again, all the stuff about being sort of methodical and about the sort of being a hitman, I really liked because again, it worked quite well. But I just think there was a sort of like the way in which it then sort of employed this sort of the moral dilemma, subsequent moral dilemmas of being a hitman. It was so prosaic and so sort of, it just plodded through the sort of such familiar territory. And again, I love a film that, there are some great examples of movies that stick religiously to the confines. Confines might be the wrong word. I keep saying that word and going, no, the wrong word. But, like it sticks so well and so rigidly to the aspects of genre, and it breathes life into that, which I think can definitely happen. And again, I wonder in the context of rewatching this film, maybe I'll give it more credit on that basis.
Yeah, maybe.
Because I love that. I love a fucking straight-laced genre experience that reminds you there's still life in the stuff you think you've seen 1,000 times.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that'll dilute in the future. But I just felt that, like, again, goes back to that straight-laced thing. It was so familiar and so sort of pedestrian. And I just thought, I don't know, like it felt more like in those elements to me, like those bang average Netflix thrillers that you see.
Yeah, okay. I think it's elevated by Fincher sticking to his style. Well, there's a lot of handheld in it. He doesn't usually do handheld.
The bit where he's running down the stairs, I was like, fucking hell, this is weird for Fincher.
It was odd because
it's weird, Dave.
Yeah. Like he's famous for not using that and using it really sparingly.
He fucking hates it.
Yeah, and I was really surprised by the amount of handheld. I don't know whether it was laziness or whether he wanted to challenge himself. I'm not sure, but it did. I agree. It did come across as a bit like, oh, this feels rushed. Maybe that was the style that it kind of chose to employ, and maybe he's just sick of people like me telling him, "Oh, you don't like handheld, do you?"
He's listening, thinking, "You fucker, Ben, I'll get you for
it." There's a great Tilda Swinton's a good scene, or where she tells a joke and it takes ages.
I quite like that scene actually.
That was good. The lawyer's assistant, what he does with her, I thought that was really quite good. And the nail gun and all that kind of stuff. He's just, it kept me entranced despite the straight-lacedness of it, and I was still quite curious to see where it ended up. I think the ultimate sort of message of it is, the plot of this film concerns after he's botched up this job, they put a hit on him, which again is a really familiar trope. And one you mentioned earlier with Le Samurai, I'm sure that was a very intentional...
it's something he was very explicitly sort of referenced.
Okay. Well, he does definitely borrow from it in that respect, in that the hunter becomes the hunted kind of thing. And it ends up him meeting the client, so the guy that told him to finish off this other guy at the beginning in the first place, and it's quite... it sort of starts to... I don't know, I guess the message of it is just... these kinds of requests, right, that these hits trickle down a workforce and get diluted. So by the time he meets this guy who's in the eyes of the killer has wronged him, this guy's just a normal, very rich sort of wishy-washy bloke, and he's just baffled. He's like, oh yeah, apparently it went wrong, so I just told them to deal with it. It's all, it's all done by other people. I'm not responsible. I thought that was kind of the ultimate sort of message of it, is like in this world, it's diluted so much that you expect it to be this kind of evil bloke at the end, the overlord, and it's just like a sort of bewildered tech startup guy. I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, I like that too, actually. He'd be good at that as well, sort of obviously with his work in Social Network. It sort of feels like a little bit of a nod to that.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. I also what I really liked, again, nothing new for Fincher, but that sort of monochromatic, desaturated style. It almost feels like Fassbender's character is sort of like just draining the life out of every space he's in, and he sort of like leaves an impression on people that he has just very perfunctory interactions with, which is almost contradictory to this idea that he's like this sort of like in and out sort of guy. I liked that too, and it really suited it. Again, it's there are a few sort of moments where you sort of hear a filmmaker is working on a film within a certain genre. You think, that makes sense, and I think in the context of this, it absolutely makes sense.
Oh yeah. Like, I mean, it's written by Andrew Kevin Walker as well, who did Seven.
Yeah,
who apparently does a lot of uncredited work on loads of Fincher's films. So yeah, I was expecting an awful lot from this, and I don't know why I wasn't as disappointed as maybe a lot of other people I've spoke to about the film were. Even Georgia, actually, she was like, I hate it.
She hated it. Yeah, she thought it was shite. Yeah.
And I can kind of understand why, in that there was definitely an expectation surrounding it, and apparently it's based on a graphic novel as well. Apparently,
which might lend itself to that idea a bit more about the sort of way it's approached.
Yeah.
And not to shit on graphic novels. I mean, they're great, but no, the valid medium. It's just, I don't know. Maybe that sort of impacted the sort of process of approach to the sort of ideas. A lot more. Fassbender's pretty good.
Yeah. He's he's not doing anything extraordinary, but I feel the film would be quite out of place if
he went all in.
Yeah. I mean, his career is. He's done a lot of. He did like Assassin's Creed and all that kind of stuff recently. I hope that he chooses his roles wisely in the future. Like, do you know what I mean? Because that can happen with actors sometimes, as they like have a sort of good few years of some amazing runs and Oscar noms, and he played Steve Jobs, who's great in that, and then like makes some quite baffling choices. I continue to sort of watch him. Despite that, when that must mean something, I guess. I'm trying to think who else. I mean, Tilda Swinton's very good in it in that one. She's not in it that much.
No.
But some other, I mean, like, there's some moments in it, like, I was a bit annoyed by the fact that his house was so nice. I think they're, like, I was saying earlier,
Republic.
There's a kind of glamour about the way he's living, and you just, I don't quite, I mean, presumably he's wealthy, but I prefer it when he's, if he's this sort of lone hunter. I'd almost prefer it if he didn't have any sort of emotional ties and a kind of grounded place where he can kick back and relax. I don't know.
I mean, I think in the context of the ending, it sort of was bizarrely effective because he's like sat there with with the beautiful woman in the beautiful landscape, and he sort of just appears very hollow. About it all. So maybe it's just that thing where it's like he has this stuff because he's got nothing else to spend his money on. Because the film sort of anchors on that revenge about these people that come and sort of torture his lover.
Yeah.
But there's not enough really there. I don't know. It almost feels like he feels like he's behaving in a way he has to behave, which in the sort of context of the themes of the genre works quite well. But I just don't know if the film is intentional in that. I don't know. I feel like maybe it is. Maybe I need to give that more credit on Fincher because I can't imagine he wouldn't have considered that. I don't know. I found that whole thing a little bit bizarre.
Fincher opening credits. What do you think of those? I know they always zip by really quickly. Fincher's opening credits.
Yeah.
There's a strange thing that they've done on the poster where the eye in Killer is horizontal.
Yeah.
It's really odd. I don't know why. It kind of puts me off. Like, I know he's trying to make a bold graphic design statement or something. It's really strange. Like the eye is sideways and it's meant to be a person that's been shot. Which I think was a bit much.
No,
I think for me, at the moment, I still thought it was great. I don't know why. Maybe I think I was quite hungover when I watched it, actually. And it was quite short. It was quite a sort of mellowing experience. I then watched Girl with the Dragon Tattoo again. It led me to revisit that film. That's so good.
That
film was amazing.
That is a good movie, yeah.
That is much better than I remembered it. So I saw it twice before and I wasn't as keen on it, but it is great. That's one of his best. And then I watched Zodiac as well, which I'd love to talk about more, but I could go on for a long time about Zodiac. The Social Network as well, although so much has been said about that film, it's all sort of laid out on the table anyway. But definitely, like Zodiac, The Game, Seven, although Seven is a similar thing to The Social Network in that it's in the public's consciousness.
Yeah.
It's Mank as well. Fuck, Mank was as...
Do you know what? That's I'm embarrassed to say I've not seen it.
Mate, it's fine. It came and went. It's on Netflix. It was
and that's strange because I love Mankiewicz, the director it's based on, writer-director. He's great. So yeah, I need to watch that movie. What am I fucking doing? I might do that this weekend.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear what you think about that because it's an odd one for Fincher, and Gary Oldman's fantastic in it, and it's that kind of... It's much better than Babylon, I'll say that, like in the sense of the Hollywood fable kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot about...
God, I forgot we talked about that film.
Yeah. That's one of the early ones.
Episode 2 or 3, isn't it, that one?
Yeah. No, Mank's interesting. I did end up quite liking Mank, but it took a while to sort of stew over.
Yeah.
And, his dad wrote it. Fincher's dad wrote it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
It was like a passion project of his that was never realised when he was alive. And then, Fincher made it afterwards. It's quite sweet, actually.
Yeah,
it's one of his sweeter films, but not in the Benjamin Button sweet.
It's
quite sincere.
Yeah. Okay.
Sincere, sorry, not sincere.
Sincere.
Heavens.
Yeah. Talk about being sincere.
Yeah.
Shall we outro?
Let's outro it. Yeah.
Questing the cinematic void.
There we have it then. Good to talk about that film. Again, I mean, I'm really interested to see what my response to that film will be in a few years' time, because I do want to watch that again with that mindset. If I'm basically going to be a sheep and go, it's good actually.
I just did that with Dragon Tattoo. Maybe it might take a couple of watches to kind of sweeten you to it, maybe.
Yeah.
Or could the exact opposite could happen. I could hate it the second time I watch it.
This is actually worse.
Yeah.
Next week, Napoleon Dynamite, 2004. No.
Ridley
Scott's stab at a historical epic. He's stabbed the historical epic many times, but this is, a character that has dodged even the greatest cinematic giants like Kubrick. And now has fallen to
the man who gets it done regardless.
Which is admirable despite the sort of varying degrees of success. It's interesting, he's really come out fighting in interviews about it, which I sort of quite admire. You can tell he's just this sort of old bloke who just doesn't give a shit, which sometimes could be problematic, but in the context of him defending the film in terms of historical accuracy and stuff, I think it's quite funny.
Yeah, he does that. He did that with the last film that came out. He started banging on about millennials and things and phones and stuff. You're like, oh, God.
He did talk about the French. The French don't even like themselves. It's like, oh, bloody hell, Ridley. You start to sound like fucking Jeremy Clarkson now.
Yeah.
But, I'm interested to sort of watch the film on that basis, about the idea of the historical epic, what the responsibility is of a historical epic. If the film's intention is to get as many bums on seats as possible, is it necessarily going to achieve that through sticking rigorously to detail just to impress a couple of historians who aren't going to give the film back its budget? It's an interesting discussion, I think, weighing up the pros and cons of either. As someone that loves history and loves movies,
it's really towing that line.
It's an interesting discussion point. We could talk more broadly about that as well.
I think so. Definitely historical epics, because it's a gamble making one. Even if you got Scott, even if you got Phoenix, and Vanessa Kirby and $250 million, it is a fucking gamble. It's still gonna,
historical epics are a big part of the sort of the DNA of the medium, but there are so many that are fucking shit. You know, they've felled some great filmmakers. Fucking Oliver Stone with Eyes Under the Grey. I mean, Jesus Christ, you know, like
Shit,
that's a bizarre film.
It is, yeah.
I am tempted as well to to watch the original Napoleon, the silent film, which I've not seen before.
Yeah, that could
so if
be
I can source that, maybe we could watch that together for the sake of comparison.
Absolutely, yeah,
because it is like one of the big, events of silent cinema. So maybe we could do that. And a blind spot for me because I've never seen it. So
yeah, same. Yeah.
Righto. So that next week, Ridley, Old Man Ridley, Old Man Napoleon.
There's a great bit in those sort of Hollywood roundtables where they get directors in.
Oh yeah, I always find there's a bit insufferable to watch.
They are a bit,
because I often love a lot of the people that are involved.
Yeah,
but they always seem a bit arse kissy and a bit, I don't know, which annoys me.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that because there's a lot of that going on, and then they turn to Ridley and they're talking about the difficulty of making films, and they turn to him and he's like, "No, mate, it's easy. It's like just get it done." Yeah, that's literally all he says.
That's the fucking philosophy right there. That encapsulates Ridley Scott. Yeah,
it's contrarian.
Again, not that I know him, but yeah, Tony Scott's better. I'm just gonna go and say it. We've already said this.
We have,
yeah. We'll stand by that. Yeah. So, yeah. On that, have a good week.
Yes,
and
catch you in the next one.
Catch you later. Love you. Bye-bye.
Bye.